Do not ignore this moment, because what I am about to say cannot wait any longer. I need your full attention now, because this is not an ordinary second in your day, and it is not another passing message that can be heard later and forgotten by tomorrow. I am speaking into this exact moment because something has reached its limit, and heaven is no longer allowing delay to continue the way it has until now. I know you have heard many voices, many promises, many words that sounded important but faded when the night returned and your heart still carried the same burden. But this moment is different because I am not speaking to entertain your emotions. I am speaking because there is movement already happening around you that you cannot yet see, and if you treat this lightly, you may fail to understand why everything around your life has suddenly begun to shift. I stopped everything around you so you could hear me now. I interrupted the noise. I pressed through the distractions. I allowed this exact pause because your spirit must hear what your mind has almost given up expecting. You have asked me in silence if I still see what they did, if I still remember the words that wounded you, if I still know how deeply certain nights broke you when no one stayed long enough to understand your pain. I have heard every question you buried because you no longer had strength to repeat it aloud. Only 1 minute remains before I move what hath been delayed for too long. That is why your spirit feels this unusual weight right now, because something irreversible has already begun in the unseen, and what is beginning cannot return to the place it came from. You thought many times that perhaps nothing would ever change, that perhaps what hurt you would simply become part of your normal life, something you would learn to carry until your heart became numb enough not to react. But I did not create you to live beneath endless injury while pretending you are healed. I did not preserve you through nights of exhaustion only to leave you standing in the same sorrow forever. What I am about to reveal is the only door your enemies never saw coming. While they studied your weakness, while they assumed your silence meant defeat, while they believed your tears proved you had no strength left, I was preparing something they never imagined because they judged only what their eyes could see. They thought they understood the limits of your story, but they never understood what I can prepare in hidden places while you are still trying to survive. I remained silent while you cried, but my silence was never weakness. You questioned that silence many times. You wondered why I did not interrupt sooner, why I allowed certain wounds to deepen, why I permitted words to reach your heart that should never have touched you. You wondered why those who caused pain seemed untouched while you were left carrying nights so heavy that sleep itself became difficult. But my silence was not surrender, and it was never permission for evil to win. My silence was the gathering of what must be answered completely, because partial justice was never my plan for you. I saw every time you held yourself together in front of others only to collapse when no one could hear you. I saw every moment you tried to explain your pain and were met with coldness, misunderstanding, or indifference. I saw when you stopped explaining because even speaking became too exhausting. I saw the nights you broke down when nobody knew your pain. I saw the tears that never became words, the prayers that never fully formed because exhaustion took your voice before the sentence was complete. The same people who wounded you are about to witness what my hand can do. They knew how to touch your weakness, but they did not understand that I was counting every act, every hidden intention, every careless word, every moment they believed there would never be an answer. There are things people imagine disappear because they happen in private, but nothing disappears before me. Nothing spoken over you vanished. Nothing done against you escaped my sight. What they dismissed as small was recorded fully. What they justified in their own mind remained visible before heaven. And now they will learn that silence from me does not mean absence of judgment. There comes a moment when what has been stored quietly begins to move with force, and that moment is closer than you realize now. My wrath has already begun moving before your eyes can understand it. That movement does not always arrive first with visible signs. Sometimes it begins where no human eye notices, in places where decisions shift, where protection rises, where doors change direction before anyone understands why events no longer obey old patterns. If you leave before hearing this fully, you may miss the instruction meant for tonight. Because this is not only about what I will do around you, it is also about what you must understand before the next part begins. You have survived pain, but survival alone is not the final part of your story. There is a difference between surviving what hurt you and understanding why I preserved you through it. I preserve you because what tried to break you could not be allowed to finish its work. I preserved you because what cried against your future could not be permitted to define your ending. I preserved you because there are things still assigned to your life that pain was never given authority to destroy. Even when you believed strength had almost disappeared, I kept something alive in you that darkness could not fully reach. That is why you are still here hearing this now. Not because your strength was always enough, but because my hand remained where you thought nothing remained. Type Amen deep in your heart if you believe today's blessing is truly for you. You must understand how near this moment truly is. This is why your heart has felt restless, why certain thoughts have returned, why old wounds have suddenly felt close again. It is not because you are being pulled backward. It is because the final pressure before movement often touches what hurt most deeply before release begins. I know how tired you became waiting for what never seemed to arrive. I know how difficult it was watching others move forward while your own life seemed trapped inside unanswered questions. I know how many times you smiled when inside you felt forgotten. But forgotten people do not receive this kind of interruption from me. Forgotten people are not called into moments where heaven speaks with urgency. Forgotten people are not told that delay has reached its edge. What is happening now is not random emotion. It is not passing intensity. It is the beginning of something that has already crossed into your life before you fully understand it. There are forces shifting that you cannot yet name. There are answers already moving that have not yet touched your visible world. There are things breaking apart that once looked permanent. And while you still wonder how, I am already standing inside what comes next. The same night you believed nothing was changing, movement had already started. The same hour you thought silence still ruled, decisions in the unseen had already begun to turn. Do not mistake this moment for another ordinary comfort meant only to help you feel stronger for one night. This is warning, comfort, justice, and instruction all at once. What hurt you is not being ignored. What was delayed is not forgotten. Of the pen touch is not outside my reach. And before this night fully passes, you will sense that something has entered the atmosphere around your life that was not there before. Not because you forced it, not because you earned it, but because the time appointed for movement has arrived. I speak now because your heart must be ready when what has been hidden begins to appear, because when I begin answering fully, even those who doubted what I saw will understand that my silence was never the end of your story. My child, listen carefully now, because this moment carries a weight greater than you understand. And I do not want you to treat these words as something ordinary that can be delayed for another hour, another night, or another season of your life. I am speaking with urgency because the time surrounding you has shifted, and even though your eyes still see familiar walls, familiar people, familiar struggles, the unseen world around you is no longer standing still. What you call another ordinary minute has already been marked in heaven as a turning point, and what begins here cannot be understood if you listen carelessly. I need your full attention because I am not speaking into your life casually. I am speaking because something that remained held back for longer than you expected has reached the exact moment appointed for movement. There are minutes in human life that pass unnoticed, and then there are moments chosen carefully where eternity presses into ordinary time. This is one of those moments, and that is why your heart must remain still enough to hear me fully. You have asked many times why certain pain remained so long, why certain doors never opened, why certain answers seemed delayed until your strength almost disappeared beneath the waiting. You wondered whether silence meant abandonment, whether my stillness meant I had stepped away from the details of what happened to you. But this exact moment is proof that I was never absent. Heaven has chosen this minute carefully because there are words that could not be released before now. If they had reached you too early, you would have heard them through pain and not through readiness. If they had come before now, you would have tried to understand them while still carrying confusion that had not yet fully broken. But now your spirit stands in a place where even if you feel weak, you are able to hear with a deeper understanding than before. That is why this is not random. I do not speak at random when a soul has carried as much hidden weight as you have carried. Please support our channel. Our work is to bring happiness in your life and devotion to God. And if you want, you can support me via Ko-Fi. The link is provided in the description and in the pinned comment. Show your support. I know how long you have endured what others never fully saw. I know how many times you learned to hide sorrow because explaining it became more exhausting than carrying it alone. I know how many nights you lay awake with questions that never found language because your own thoughts felt too heavy to organize. You smiled when people expected strength, but inside you were asking how much longer the silence would continue. You looked for signs that something would change, yet morning after morning often looked too much like the day before. That long waiting created a quiet ache inside you, an ache you rarely explained because even those closest to you did not understand how deeply delay can wound a person who has prayed sincerely and still watched nothing move. But I saw that suffering fully. I saw what it cost you to continue. I saw how often you almost accepted pain as permanent simply because too much time had passed without visible change. Now I tell you clearly, delay is over. What remained suspended is no longer staying in suspension. What remained held back has reached the edge of release. You may still look around and think nothing appears different, but not every beginning announces itself loudly. Some beginnings arrive first as a word, a warning, a stirring, a pressure in the spirit before visible evidence follows. That is why I am speaking before your eyes fully understand what your life is about to encounter. Delay is over not because human circumstances suddenly became favorable, but because the appointed measure of waiting has completed what it needed to complete inside you. There were parts of your strength that could only form through endurance. There were truths about people around you that only time could expose. There were hidden intentions that had to reveal themselves completely so you would no longer mistake appearance for loyalty. The waiting itself uncovered much more than you realized. I watched silently while all this unfolded, but my silence was never distance. It was never permission for what hurt you to continue forever without answer. Silence often carries work too deep for immediate explanation. While you were asking why nothing changed, I was allowing hidden things to come fully into light. While you were wondering why certain people continued untouched, I was permitting masks to remain until they removed themselves by their own actions. While you feared nothing was happening, I was making certain that when movement began, it would not be partial, temporary, or incomplete. My silence has always held purpose, even when your tears made that difficult to believe. Yet now the season of silence has reached the place where I must speak directly, because what comes next requires you to understand that movement has already started in ways your natural eyes cannot yet measure. You must hear me now, because what I am revealing contains survival instruction. These are not words meant only to comfort emotion for a moment. These words carry direction for the next part of your path, because when hidden movement begins, those who are unaware often misread what they see. I do not want you confusing the shaking around you with destruction, when in truth much of what shakes must shake because false support can no longer remain standing. Certain structures around your life looked stable only because delay allowed them to remain untouched. But once movement begins, false foundations cannot continue pretending strength. That is why your spirit must stay alert. Not everything leaving your life is loss. Not everything breaking apart is harm. Some things must separate because they were never built to survive where I'm taking you next. There is also something else you must understand. A hidden way out has already been revealed, though you have not fully recognized it yet. You have been looking for dramatic openings while I have already placed subtle direction near you. The way out does not always arrive as a loud miracle first. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet instruction, a sudden inner knowing, a closed door that protects rather than punishes, an interruption that feels confusing until later clarity shows why it was necessary. The way out I prepared is hidden from those who watched your struggle and assumed they understood how your story would end. They expected your options to remain limited because they judged only what they saw outwardly. But what I prepare often begins where human expectation has no access. This is why you must remain present and not withdraw now. If you stop listening too early, you may miss what your spirit needs most in this exact hour. There are moments when survival depends less on physical strength and more on hearing clearly before movement begins. I am speaking before visible events intensify, because once they do, many voices may rise around you, and not every voice will understand what heaven is doing. Some will interpret your shift wrongly. Some will call necessary endings failure. Some will not understand why certain people must fall silent around you. But I am warning you now so your heart does not become confused when visible change follows invisible decision. You have suffered too long to step into the next moment without understanding its seriousness. Too much has already passed through your hands, through your nights, through your thoughts for you to treat this minute as small. Heaven did not choose this moment casually. I chose it because your life now stands near a crossing point where what has remained hidden begins slowly to show itself. I chose it because what must now unfold requires that you know I am not arriving late. I arrive at the exact point where what has matured in silence becomes ready for release. So stay attentive, because this opening chapter is not the end of what I am saying, it is only the doorway. What follows will explain why your pain was not ignored, why silence lasted as long as it did, why certain people were allowed to reveal themselves, and why the next movement in your life cannot be entered with old fear still ruling your heart. This word is not merely encouragement, it is preparation. It is the beginning of understanding why this final minute was chosen, why I am speaking now instead of later, and why the path opening before you must be entered with full awareness that I have already gone ahead of you. My child, before you understand what I am about to do next, I need you to know with certainty that nothing you endured was hidden from me, not even the pain you believed was too small to matter, not even the nights you convinced yourself to stop speaking because you thought no one would understand anyway. I remember the moments you tried to appear calm while inside you were struggling to keep your heart from collapsing under the weight of what you could not explain. I remember the private suffering you never fully described because every time you tried, the words felt weaker than the pain itself. I watched you carry conversations in your mind that never reached your lips because deep inside you had already learned that some people hear words without hearing wounds. You became careful with what you revealed because disappointment taught you that not every listening face carries true understanding. Yet while others only saw fragments, I saw the whole burden exactly as it was, without confusion, without distortion, without missing a single hidden ache. I saw the nights you cried alone when the world around you became quiet and there was no longer any reason to pretend you were strong. I saw the hours when darkness made every thought heavier and memories returned with greater force because silence gave them room to speak. I saw you lie awake when exhaustion should have brought sleep, but pain kept your mind restless. I heard the breathing you tried to steady so no one nearby would know tears were falling again. I saw you wipe your face before morning because you did not want another day to begin with questions you no longer had energy to answer. Those nights were not invisible to me. Even when no human voice asked if you were all right, I remained present beside every breath, every trembling moment, every quiet breakdown that happened behind closed doors where only heaven witnessed what your heart carried. Comment thank you, Father, for all you've done if your heart overflows with gratitude. There were also pains you never named because they came from places you once trusted. That is why some wounds cut deeper than others, because betrayal always reaches farther when it comes wrapped in familiarity. I know the betrayal that happened in secret, the conversations held without your knowledge, the hidden intentions masked by kind words, the moments when someone smiled while carrying motives that would later wound you. I know how confusing it felt when you sensed something was wrong but could not yet prove what your spirit already feared. I know the exact moment your heart recognized that loyalty was not as strong as you once believed. And I know how deeply that realization exhausted you because betrayal does not only hurt once, it continues hurting as the mind revisits details, asking when truth changed, when trust became unsafe, when closeness became something uncertain. I also saw how often you blamed yourself for what others misunderstood. You tried to explain your heart, but your words were measured through assumptions that were never true. Some of the people you trusted most did not truly understand what you were carrying because they judged your silence as distance, your exhaustion as weakness, your caution as coldness. They did not know that inside you were fighting battles that had already drained much of your strength before the day even began. Some expected words from you when all you had left was survival. Some interpreted your pain through their own opinions rather than asking what was truly happening inside you. And because of that, you often stood feeling unseen even in places where you expected comfort. Being misunderstood by those you trusted most became one of the quietest pains because it forced you to question whether being honest would even help. I know how emotional exhaustion slowly entered your life. It did not arrive in one dramatic moment. It came through repeated disappointments, through repeated effort without visible relief, through repeated attempts to hold together what was already wearing thin inside you. There were mornings when your body moved before your spirit had strength to follow. There were days when even simple tasks felt heavier because your heart had already been carrying too much for too long. Emotional exhaustion made ordinary conversations difficult because even kindness sometimes felt hard to receive when your thoughts were already crowded with hidden burdens. Yet still you kept going, often beyond what others imagined possible, because something inside you refused to completely surrender even when your strength felt dangerously low. I heard the silent pain nobody understood, especially the pain you stopped describing because you feared sounding repetitive or fragile. Some pain does not become louder. It becomes quieter because the soul grows tired of translating itself. You learned how to answer briefly when people asked how you were because long explanations felt impossible. You learned how to nod when inside you wanted someone to stay long enough to hear what your silence meant. But even when silence became your language, I understood every word your heart never formed. There are prayers that never became full sentences but entered heaven completely. There are cries too deep for ordinary speech that still reach me with perfect clarity. Every tear was counted. Not one escaped my notice. Tears you thought were small because they fell quietly still mattered fully before me. Tears that came suddenly because one memory returned at the wrong moment were counted. Tears you wiped quickly because someone entered the room were counted. Tears that came from frustration, from grief, from loneliness, from disappointment, from emotional fatigue, all of them were counted with exact care. Human eyes often measure tears by what they can see publicly, but I count tears no one else ever notices. I count the tears that never became visible because they remained held inside aching eyes. I count the tears that rose but were swallowed because you had no safe place to release them. Nothing about your grief escaped record, and every silent prayer entered heaven. Even the prayers you thought were too weak because they contained almost no words still arrived completely. The nights you whispered only a few broken phrases because strength failed you, those prayers entered heaven. The moments when all you could say was my name without explanation, those prayers entered heaven. The times you sat in silence because pain itself became prayer, those also entered heaven. Prayer does not require perfect language for me to hear it. I know what your spirit means even when your mouth says almost nothing. I heard when you asked for help without confidence. I heard when you asked why without expecting answer. I heard when you asked simply for enough strength to survive another day. You must understand this deeply now because part of your healing begins when you stop believing your suffering happened unseen. It did not happen unseen. I was present in every hidden place. I saw the way you tried to protect others from your own pain even while your own heart was close to breaking. I saw the restraint you showed when anger would have been easier. I saw the dignity you maintained when explaining yourself no longer seemed worth the effort. I saw how often you chose silence instead of bitterness even when bitterness seemed justified. These things were not ignored. Even when you doubted whether anyone truly understood, I remained the one who understood fully. Even when people misread your silence, I read it accurately. Even when trust around you weakened, my attention did not weaken. Even when exhaustion convinced you nothing was changing, heaven continued receiving everything you released in hidden hours. This is why you must let your heart receive these words now. You were never invisible in your suffering, never abandoned inside those long nights, never forgotten inside those unanswered moments. What you carried privately had been known completely from the beginning, and because I know it completely, what comes next in your story will also answer what was hidden, not only what was visible. My child, I know one of the deepest questions that rose inside you during those long seasons was this. If I saw everything, why did I remain silent for so long? Why did I not interrupt sooner when your heart was already tired, when your mind had already reached nights where even small hope felt difficult to hold? Why did I allow certain situations to continue until you felt as if silence itself had become another burden resting on your chest? You asked this not only with words but with tears, with exhausted breaths, with those moments when you looked upward in quiet disappointment because you expected an answer that did not arrive in the way you imagined. But hear me clearly now, my silence was never abandonment. Not for one moment did my silence mean I stepped away from you. Not for one breath did my stillness mean I had accepted what wounded you as permanent. Silence from me has never meant absence. It has always carried work too deep for immediate explanation. And though it hurt while you lived inside it, there was purpose unfolding beneath what you could not yet see. You often thought silence meant nothing was happening because human eyes naturally search for movement they can recognize. But some of the deepest works I perform begin where visible proof is absent. While you were watching the surface and wondering why nothing changed, I was allowing deeper truths to rise where hidden things could no longer stay hidden forever. If I had interrupted too early, some truths would have remained covered, and you would still have trusted what should never have continued holding your confidence. There were people around you whose intentions had not fully revealed themselves yet. There were hidden motives still wrapped inside careful words, hidden attitudes still concealed beneath temporary kindness, hidden disloyalties not yet mature enough to expose themselves completely. Silence allowed hidden enemies to fully reveal themselves. If I had moved too quickly, you would have defended people whose hearts were already drifting away from sincerity. You would have mistaken incomplete evidence for loyalty simply because the full truth had not yet emerged. I know that part was painful because while silence continued, you still gave chances, still hoped, still believed some people would choose honesty before harm. But silence became the space where masks slowly weakened. The things hidden in private conversations, in subtle choices, in repeated patterns, in small betrayals that at first seemed uncertain, all of that needed time to become undeniable. Some people cannot hide themselves forever. When enough time passes, their own actions eventually speak louder than what they claim with their mouths. Silence exposed true intentions not only through one event but through repeated moments that gradually formed a clearer picture before your spirit. There were times when you sensed something was wrong but questioned yourself because evidence was incomplete. Silence gave enough time for doubt to disappear and truth to become unmistakable. This is why some delays were necessary even when they wounded you emotionally. If I had removed certain people too early, you might still long for what I protected you from losing. If I had ended certain relationships before their true nature surfaced, your heart might still believe what was false simply because it ended before clarity arrived. But now many things you once questioned have become clearer because silence allowed patterns to repeat until truth stood in front of you without disguise. What looked confusing at first slowly became visible because silence gives hidden character room to reveal itself fully. Yet my silence was not only about exposing others. It was also about preparing you spiritually for what your next season requires. There are things you asked me to change that could not fully arrive while your inner strength still depended too heavily on visible reassurance. I needed to build something deeper inside you than quick comfort. Silence prepared your spirit to hear me without constant external proof. In earlier seasons, you often looked for immediate signs before resting in confidence, but silence taught your spirit how to endure without daily visible confirmation. That lesson is painful, but it creates depth no easy season can create. You learned during silence how to remain standing when explanation did not come quickly. You learned how to continue breathing through days that offered little emotional reward. You learned how to pray even when prayer did not immediately alter what surrounded you. You learned how to survive moments when even your own thoughts doubted whether anything unseen was still moving for your good. This hidden endurance was not small. It became strength forming where nobody applauded you, where no one fully understood what continuing cost you. Endurance built quietly inside you while you thought silence meant only delay. But heaven saw every hidden strengthening taking place. Silence strengthened hidden endurance in ways you will only fully understand later. There were many moments when you believed you were becoming weaker because tears returned often, because fatigue stayed longer, because emotions felt heavy. But hidden beneath those feelings was strength still forming. True endurance does not always feel powerful while it is being built. Often it feels fragile because it grows while pain continues pressing against it. Yet every time you continued despite exhaustion, endurance grew. Every time you chose not to collapse into bitterness, endurance grew. Every time disappointment returned and still you reached for even a small prayer, endurance grew. Even when you believed you were barely holding on, hidden endurance was becoming stronger than you realized. I also used silence to separate your dependence from certain human voices. There were people whose approval once mattered too much to your peace. There were voices you trusted so deeply that their misunderstanding could shake your confidence more than it should have. Silence gradually taught you that not every human voice deserves equal authority over your spirit. Because when human understanding failed you during silent seasons, you slowly learned to bring deeper questions directly to me instead of expecting every answer through people around you. That lesson did not come easily, but it has prepared you for a future where discernment will matter more than approval. My child, I know silence often felt cruel while you lived inside it because pain always asks for immediate explanation. Pain wants quick meaning because unanswered suffering feels heavier than suffering with clarity. But silence had purpose even when painful. Every day that seemed still carried layers of preparation beyond what you could measure. While you feared nothing was changing, hidden roots were growing where future storms would not easily uproot you. While you feared silence meant loss, discernment was sharpening quietly inside you. While you feared abandonment, hidden protection remained active around many things you never even knew were trying to enter your life. There were dangers I prevented while you focused only on the pain I had not yet removed. There were doors I kept closed while you mourned openings that never came. There were paths I did not allow because silence itself protected you from choices you would have regretted if quick relief had arrived too soon. Not every unanswered request was denial. Often it was protection dressed in silence. Not every still moment meant inactivity. Often it meant timing had not yet completed its deeper work. And now that silence has carried out what it needed to accomplish, you can begin seeing why certain truths could only mature there. You now understand some people differently because silence gave their hearts time to speak through actions. You now understand yourself differently because silence revealed what remains inside you even when comfort disappears. You now hear my voice differently because silence taught you to search deeper than surface emotion. Right, amen, Lord. I still believe if your faith is standing firm through it all. And share this video.